homeowner in Conyers says her HOA threatened to put a lien on her home. Her response? Bring the lien. I'm bringing the lawsuit. I'm Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe, and this is Behind the Investigation with Atlanta News First Investigates. And I'm joined now by Anastasia Olmos, the investigative reporter who's been all over this story. Tell us about it.
Well, another HOA story. Homeowners associations, not just here in Georgia, but around the country, we are finding, homeowners have a lot of problems with their associations and they don't really know where to go. So we get these tips in, and this one in particular, she had a lien on her home in Georgia. That is legal if your fines, honestly, any amount of fine, but if that fine exceeds $2,000, then they can foreclose on your home. So that's why the lien is so scary, because you work your whole life to own a home, and if some issues come up between you and your HOA, you could lose your home over not paying their fines. And so we really dug into what is going on in this community, as well as what homeowners' rights are.
And Conyers left fighting for their homes. This comes after an ongoing battle to figure out where their mandatory HOA fees are going.
And with more than 2 million Georgians living in communities with HOAs, Atlanta News First Investigates Anastasia Olmos is here looking into your rights.
That's right. There's little to no regulation under current Georgia law. An HOA can file a lien on your home, actually in court, for any amount owed, and can foreclose on your homes when that lien exceeds $2,000.
But it was very hard. It was hard.
Michelle Bernard remembers the challenges she faced buying her home.
When I came searching in this subdivision, I was advised that I could not afford its subdivision by the realtor.
He was wrong, but 2 decades later, the business owner, wife, and mom says she feels like she's still fighting to own the home.
It doesn't make any sense for any hard-working individual to go through these things.
Michelle lives in Channing Cove, a subdivision of about 40 homes in Conyers.
This is considered our community's common area.
With 3 of these common grass areas and this retention pond, original homeowners agreed to $100 annual HOA dues, what Michelle describes as reasonable. Today, they're $200. But
they have forced people to pay thousands and thousands of dollars and have never provided proof that they owe it.
Fines and fees for things like pond maintenance and replacing garage doors without HOA permission. Michelle and at least 2 other homeowners tell Atlanta News First Investigates they've asked for receipts and bank statements of where the money's going, but they've never received it.
All they send out is a typed up Excel spreadsheet and want you to believe whatever's on that spreadsheet.
And when they refuse to pay, the fees start to rack up. Court records show the HOA has placed liens on 5 homes for unpaid balances. 2 homeowners tell us they've paid fees just to avoid losing their homes.
I told them, bring the lien, I'm bringing the lawsuit.
Michelle is one of 2 homeowners suing the HOA for the charges that they believe are fraudulent.
They're made up fees.
The community voted for this homeowner to take over as president last year. He wouldn't go on camera for concerns with his day job, but he tells us he resigned when he couldn't get a financial audit.
I'm not going to take over when I don't know what he's done.
That left the previous president, Orton Reynolds, in charge.
I'm with Atlanta News First Investigates. We are currently recording right now. But we've received some concerns about the financials with the Homeowners Association, and we wanted to ask you if you're aware of the concerns in the community.
Don't know anything about my concern about any financial of the committee.
Reynolds tells us they send financial documentation out quarterly, referring to these Excel sheets.
They claim the money has possibly been misused.
I would say that's an improper and incorrect statement.
Okay.
And not true.
Would you share the receipts and financials with Atlanta News First?
Receipts about what?
Under Georgia law, homeowners have a right to see all HOA receipts.
Georgia has a lot of HOA issues.
Real estate attorney Patience Casey Sadie deals with hundreds of HOA cases a year. Fines, fees, and liens top the list of issues.
There's no monetary limit. What the law bases on is reasonableness.
In Channing Cove, residents question what's reasonable. Just days after we spoke with the president, homeowners received 2 new emailed policies prohibiting them from divulging personal information and making slanderous statements about other property owners. According to the policy, they must write an apology letter within 48 hours of receiving a warning, and if it's against a board member, that's a $1,500 fine.
They're trying to force me to settle the lawsuit.
Michelle's lien was for less than $3,000, but she says the HOA is offering her a $40,000 settlement, denying most of the allegations. Why would they offer you money?
To make it go away.
But Michelle says a payout from the HOA's insurance isn't accountability.
I need someone to address this because it's affecting our community.
You heard there, it is complicated, but there is more to this story from both sides, and we're still investigating. As we've previously reported, there's currently no government office that oversees or investigates HOAs. We want to let you know that under Georgia law, you have the right to view financial records, including those itemized receipts. You can request an audit, but the HOA does not have to pay for it. Late fees cannot be more than 10% of the fee or assessment. So if you're battling with your HOA, their fines, or even navigating issues as part of an HOA board, we want to hear from you. Text HOA to 470-777-WANF. That's 470-777-9263. We'll send you a list of resources straight to your phone. I'm Anastasia Olmos, Atlanta News First investigates.
Now, Stasi, we got a huge response to your story. I've never seen so many emails and tips after a report. Many people who are members of homeowners associations asking all sorts of questions, but one common question you answered somewhat in the story is, do I have a right to see the financial documents, and what documents am I allowed to see in my HOA?
That's right. Mentioned in the story is that, if you're a member, part of a homeowners association, you do have the right to view receipts. So not just financial documents such as an Excel sheet that they've filled out, but the actual itemized receipts of where these purchases are going. That by law you are allowed to see. You are also allowed to get an audit of what has been taking place with your HOA's financials, but they don't have to pay for it. So that kind of gets a little contentious there of, are homeowners going to pay for audits, because they can be very expensive. So the best thing for an HOA to do is be transparent, with these fines and fees, so you can be assessed in addition to your regular dues. So for example, if your dues are $100, $200, or $1,000, you can also have a special assessment. And that's one thing that happened in this community over that retention pond, is they said the county, said it needed some upkeep. We did confirm that the county had said it needed upkeep. They needed to clear some of the trees and stuff like that. And so they assessed the homeowners the cost that they said they were paying the tree company. That is legal to put that assessment on. There's really no cap there. They could say, hey, you owe $300.
And there's nothing you can do about it other than voting out the board.
Yes, you have to have that money, set aside if you're assessed that. But then they have to, then follow up with their part in producing the receipts for where that money went. And so that was one of the problems that arose here in this community. However, the fines here that they get for not paying those assessments and those dues, anything like that, you can also get late fees on those. So those late fees under the law here in Georgia are capped at 10% of whatever that fine was. So if you get fined, for example, one of the homeowners in this community had a fine for replacing his garage door, he said, without getting HOA approval, which is something that's common in HOAs, is they want to keep the community looking, all the same and having the right decor and aesthetic look. But he apparently was not allowed to have glass on his garage door, but he wanted his family to be able to see out before they left in the morning to go to work early in the morning. And so he replaced his door. He said he was going out of town and it just needed to get done. He wrote to the HOA. I read through the emails, and the HOA said, you didn't let us know in time. This is also not in compliance, so it's a $400 charge. If he does not pay that, he can then get late fees. It can only be 10% of that fine. And so he said that he paid it right away. He didn't agree with it. He didn't want to, but he was so worried about that racking up, getting a lien on his home, and then possibly getting, a foreclosure in the future at some point. And so knowing your rights of what you're allowed, not only to request, but also to be charged. And the sad thing that we really are pulling out of these stories and getting all these tips is that homeowners are having to hire their own private attorneys in order to practice their own rights in their homeowners associations, because there is no office that oversees homeowners associations in the state of Georgia.
Which is why we're getting so many of these tips, is because there's no one else holding them accountable. You know, the other thing is that there's that Latin phrase, caveat emptor, buyer beware. And a lot of times when you're buying a new home, you're so excited, you do maybe hire an inspector to make sure there's nothing wrong with the house. But very few people read fully through or have someone help them read through the covenants. Because when you buy a home in a homeowners association, you are agreeing to those covenants and you are bound by them. And sometimes we see in the tips, some people are having trouble getting their covenants. They're supposed to be given to you before closing as part of that, due diligence that you and the realtor do before closing. But how do you get a copy of your covenants, and where are they filed? Where can I find those?
Brendan, I love that you're asking me this, because I learned a lot of this from you as we were here working late one night and kind of going through this, because you actually did this with your homeowners association. You had to essentially step in, right? And so the covenants will be in the courthouse, correct? And the bylaws, which will be the laws that your homeowners association has to follow, will be with the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah, that's right.
And so what we found in this report is we were trying to figure out, well, what do the covenants say? What do the bylaws say? Which can also be very confusing.
Because they use those phrases interchangeably, but they're actually two different documents.
Exactly, and that's what we found in this story. Is I was asking Brendan, I said, okay, am I crazy? I don't understand what's been filed here and what's really stands. And you took a look at it and you were like, they're interchangeably filing bylaws and covenants, is what it appears, seems like to us. And so we just basically put a line in the story of, like, we're not sure really what rules do stand for these homeowners. And that's another thing. You want to go to your courthouse, you want to pull your covenants, you want to know what the rules are, you want to go to Secretary of State, and the bylaws, they can be online as well. But in order to enforce those or to even understand them, sometimes you do need an attorney. And that was another thing that this attorney said, is sometimes people move into communities and don't even know that there's a homeowners association, because whoever was supposed to run it kind of just fell off, stopped charging people, etc. Something happens in the community and they realize, we have got to change this road, or we've got to add lights, or we have to do something, maintenance, or a car ran into the front sign and now we need money to replace it. And so all of a sudden you have an HOA and you're like, I didn't know there was an HOA here.
Right.
You gotta go to the courthouse, check your address, check the community, make sure that you know what you're buying into there in that homeowners association.
Wow,
community.
and I've noticed, because I've looked at a lot of these covenants, and to be clear, I know I asked you the question, but the answer is that the bylaws are the rules by which the HOA as a corporation, the board, has to operate, and the covenants are sort of the rules that everybody agrees to in how you as a member of the HOA is supposed to operate, and how it's set up. And there can be some cross-pollination between those documents, and they're often written by non-lawyers, even though they're binding legal documents, binding on you once, because it's essentially a contract you enter into when you buy that property. One thing I saw in some of these is in the covenants, it will give the board unilateral power to create rules without people voting on them.
Right.
Otherwise, they need a 2/3 vote of the neighborhood to change the covenants, right?
Yes, and see, that was another thing that I had to sit down and kind of walk through with you as well, is that the law says that there has to be a 2/3 vote to approve changes. Those changes mean the covenants, what is filed, which actually has to be in the form of an amendment and filed in the courthouse. However, they can hold these meetings with, for instance, this documentation that we found in this community said, what the percent was, like 20-something% had to attend this meeting for it to count.
I see. So it's based on the quorum, not all of the residents.
Exactly. So they said, as
Wow.
long as this many people meet and we agree, then there's this new rule or this new policy. And I mentioned that, they send out these policies via email. In the story, if you missed it in those, those emails that they sent out right after we were in the community talking to the president, he sent out 2 new policies saying that, you cannot divulge personal information about other homeowners, and you cannot, slanderous statements, and you could face a $1,500 fine if it's about a board member. That that gets into what we were talking about with the attorney is what is reasonable? Is that a reasonable fine for the policy, which that policy could technically stand because it's not a big enough change to the community to be filed in the covenant. Something like that would be like, we're now adding that you can paint your house red. Instead of just white. That is a covenant change that you would want to file that would be uniform in the community. Something as mowing your lawn, a $1,500 fine for something like mowing your lawn, that did not happen in this community, but is that reasonable? These types of questions, but at the end of the day, are you going to go to court, fight it, and prove it? That's going to cost money.
Well, so here's what's interesting. The HOA can force you to spend your own money on your own home to do certain things to comply with the covenants. Like, so if you're not following the rules or you didn't paint it the right color, they can force you to repaint it. They can force you to, plant a new tree for one you cut down in violation of the rules. And if you don't, you can be fined. And if those fines and fees exceed $2,000 with a lien on your house, they can actually sell your house to satisfy that lien. Is that correct?
Yes, and
that's pretty scary. That's a lot of power.
Exactly.
And it's your neighbors usually who are wielding that power.
Exactly. But so here's the other thing the attorney was talking about is sometimes the HOA, of course, it might be your neighbor who has, 5 kids and, 2 jobs or whatever it might be. And so they hire a management company to come in and take over the HOA.
Right.
Now they're displaced from your neighbors, like the understanding of, do you really need this tree? And, how much am I going to fine you if you don't have this? Whatever it might be. And so you have these management companies that homeowners are now calling and writing to. But these management companies have multiple HOAs, as we mentioned, so many HOAs just in Georgia alone, and management companies that are enforcing these fines. They're even having collection companies come in and collect. I've seen some of these documents where they have literally asked for $10,500 and more, and not even put on the document what it's for.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for 1 second, because sometimes, look,
Yes.
if let's flip it around to the people who count on their HOA to make sure there isn't a car up on blocks in a driveway, or that people aren't running a business out of their home that has traffic going in and out at all times of the day and night. Or maybe the other thing is some people pay their dues on time and they want to make sure their neighbors do too. I mean, why should someone pay the dues late or not pay them at all? So, have you received any feedback that says, I love my HOA, or do we just not hear from those folks, or do they not exist?
So in this last story, I put out the call that I want to hear from HOAs as well, because, like you mentioned, it does feel one-sided when we're telling these stories of, horrible situations, but there are HOAs that come through when there's a fire in the community, and, they need the grass redone, or they need some sort of, community pool fixed and, safe for the kids. There are good, HOAs out there, and so I put out the call, to people who want to express that side to us, in addition to...
Did you get any?
I have so many emails right now,
Right.
I have gone through some of them. I have not seen any from an HOA themselves, but I've gotten a lot of people asking for attorney contacts that need help.
Right.
They don't have anyone to go to. There's no office. You can't go to the inspector general.
Right. There's always the nuclear option. Can't you overthrow the board of your HOA?
Oh, so we've done a story, the last HOA story that we did, and even this one, they voted out the president. They voted in someone else or selected someone else to run as president, but then the HOA is what they've claimed does not turn over the financial information. And therefore, my last story, that homeowners association, some of the members there have filed a lawsuit. They are asking the judge to enforce the new election and demand that the financials are turned over. So yeah, you can vote them out, but they have to turn over the dues, and hopefully there's some sort of bank account. I've heard claims that there are HOAs that have multiple debit cards and credit cards. You've got to get all of that back and take over. And as you heard in this story in particular, the homeowner who was voted in as the new president, he didn't feel comfortable taking over and not knowing what had happened in the past.
Wow, stunning. I know this isn't the last HOA story we're going to hear from you. I know you don't want it to be your beat. Just put a W in front of those 3 letters and then it's whoa, right? Because that's how many emails you've received, right?
Listen, I am very willing to take this on for the state of Georgia just because there are people who are losing their homes. And, maybe that shouldn't be the outcome of some sort of dispute between you and your HOA. Maybe there should be a different outcome or some negotiations. And we've seen some laws proposed, bills proposed, even just in the last year, to kind of rein that in, to regulate, to ask for other options than liens. And so there is a possibility here where we can meet in the middle, and I'm willing to hold, our lawmakers accountable here for our homeowners in the state of Georgia.
One quick question, and this one's more personal. I know you're a renter, but you're a likely future homeowner.
Yeah.
Are you going to look for a neighborhood that has an HOA or one without one?
I'm going to give a shout out to our boss right now, Lindsay Basie, because she has said she would not buy a home in a homeowners association community with a homeowners association because of these issues. And I, quite frankly, think I would follow after her, because I work really hard for my money, and I also don't really like to give other people control. So if I want to change my deck, or if I want to, change something in my window, I want to fly a USC flag, I'm gonna, and you can't stop me.
Wow, West Coast represent. Thanks so much, Anastasia Olmos, for joining us on Behind the Investigation. I'm Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe. You can see Stasi's stories by going to atlantanewsfirst.com, click on the Investigates page. Also, a little pro tip, if you just search any of our names and pull up the bio on Atlanta News First, you can see our stories in reverse chronological order. You can also listen to this as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Investigation.